From WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 4.
Former President Donald Trump is facing 37 federal criminal charges over his handling of classified information and alleged attempts to obstruct justice. Most of the charges fall under the Espionage Act, according to the indictment unsealed today. Trump's aide, Walt Nauta, is also facing charges. The DOJ calls him Trump's co-conspirator. We're joined now by Doug Eldridge, head of Achilles PR. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon, Doug.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Doug, this is the second time the former president has been indicted this year. At the same time, he's still the favorite to win the Republican primary at this point, if you're looking at numbers. What do you think this indictment means for his campaign, and then also in terms of whether people believe or don't believe he should have been indicted here?
Well, you know, we hear so many terms thrown around that just kind of devolve to hyperbole, but there's no question this is historic. In any way you view this. This has literally never happened in the history of our country, that a former president is criminally indicted. So it's hard to sidestep the significance of that. Now, both sides, I'm going to take it just briefly away from the court of law and instead of the court of public opinion, the messaging, how you channel it, how it's received, how it's either the sword or the shield in terms of which party. This is going to be something that each side uses. And I mean that proactively, right? The Democrats will use this as a reason to preemptively disqualify or diminish the character of Trump as a viable candidate. And the Republicans will use this in equal footing to say this is tantamount to the very corruption, the proverbial swamp that we are committed to draining. See how this is the one-sided application of law. So ironically, this is taking an even bounce, even though one side right now is being charged. This is taking an even bounce to both sides in terms of political weaponry. It's interesting from a communication standpoint, certainly a case of first impression, historically speaking.
And Doug, what type of messaging can we expect to see from the former president as the case against him moves forward and get closer to a trial?
See, that's a great question, and here's why. Because it's very, very complicated. Because on one hand, you have your comms professionals that we're chumming the water. This is red meat for our voting base. This is absolutely an opportunity to galvanize us, to lock into primary, which already has a lot of distance between first and second, and make sure that we're on the debate stage for the general. But his legal counsel are saying, with respect, Mr. President, you're a nightmare client insofar as your ability to use social media and the absolute non-filter. Anything that you say in social in the run-up to a would-be trial would be admissible. Please don't make our job more complicated. Don't tie our shoelaces together, and then let's say that's from the 100-meter dash. And so from a messaging standpoint, the GOP feel, it's interesting in the package that you ran prior to me, it's interesting to see the division within the Republican Party, right? Because you have some that are coalescing and saying, look, if you redacted this fact pattern, and we didn't know if it was Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, how would you feel about it? If you had no idea, if there was no identifiers, no tipper of the scales, how would you actually come away from this?
Right.
It's interesting, the exit polling on that, it's a little bit more middle of the road. If there's an upfront assignment and you already know where it is, are you really looking at the facts, or are you just looking at the accused, the defendant? Right. Now, what's going to be important, guys, not only in the court of law, but in the court of public opinion, is that the burden is on the government. So the burden, they have to establish the facts and the damning evidence to tie that causal connection. But you have to understand, as we have all seen, good, bad, or indifferent, that Trump is a fighter and a counterpuncher. It's going to be ugly, and I don't see a third way out.
Let us ask you about that, Doug, before you go. Well, you know the way the feds operate. This is very different from the charges he's facing in the state of New York regarding the election. The feds are very patient. They have enormous resources, and when they charge, they typically, it's what do they say? It's almost like a grenade. They are going in hard and strong, and their case is usually overwhelming. By the same token, and you just said it yourself, it seems that charges against the former president, even though some people might think he's being vilified, almost rallies his base. So how do you reconcile those two things? Because even though the feds may have a strong case, there are a lot of people who think this is completely political.
Sure, and the reality is I don't think either side is wrong in that, right? And this is one of those paradoxical moments where two wrongs make a right, or both sides are right and neither side being wrong, even though they're completely polar positions. This is, when I say this is the case of first impression historically, that's not hyperbole. I think we can all agree that's absolutely the case. And more directly to your question, of course the president, from a campaign standpoint, is going to absolutely utilize this, as this is exactly what and who, there's a face to it, that we're fighting against. The opposition is going to say this is the exact reason why he should never be on the ballot. And if, depending on when it actually matriculates through the legal system, he should be disqualified, and if not, then defeated. But the thing to remember is that it's always easy to look great when you're shooting free throws, because nobody's playing defense. Today was the prosecution's day. Moving forward, President Trump, as is afforded to all of us as American citizens, right, the presumption of innocence. When it's time to play defense, things have a way of evening out. So it'll be an interesting game of one-on-one hardcore defense moving forward.
We'll leave it right there. Doug, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, guys.